Okay, so I just finished watching the 25th anniversary version of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Lots of things have changed in the past 25 years. When I first saw the film, I was 19. So I'm no longer 19. And I got to see it with my 10-year-old daughter. And it was weird seeing it in a theater. So 25 years later, you probably think, man, the effects are probably really bad. The effects in some spots are very much two-dimensional. But ironically, we've seen bad effects recently in films. So, the effects aren't fantastic in lots of spots. Certain characters, Jar Jar Binks still looks pretty good, very expressive, nice amount of texture to him. Same with Boss Nass. A lot of those characters that are more full CGI renders look pretty decent by today's standards. One of the weird things, though, probably somebody didn't recognize when I saw this earlier, is the dialogue seems to be like 75% as loud as everything else. There are times when there's dialogue going on, and I'm like, I can barely hear the dialogue. All I'm hearing is all the other ambient sounds going around. So my daughter, who was 10, we were done, and she really liked that. It was great. My daughter also enjoyed Godzilla X Kong. She liked that too. And I was asking her, I'm like, so are any of your friends coming to see this? And she was like, no, most of them don't know what Star Wars is. And I was like, but I've seen Grogu shirts. She's like, oh, they know what Baby Yoda is, but they don't know Star Wars. So yeah, they don't know that the movie came out again in the theaters. I'm like, huh. Now, I've met a few of, her few of the parents from her class. And, I'm in my mid-40s. Most of them are, mid-early 30s. And it's like, oh, that's right. When the first ones came out, were like in 70s and 80s, that would have pretty much been my generation. So then we kind of grew up with some of that, the toys and everything being on TV, with the idea being that, several years after that, the people who were young when the first set came out, they should have had kids for the second set. And I think George kind of mistimed that a little bit, when most of the people who ended up having kids, almost like in between prequel and sequel time. Jar Jar still annoying. The dialects that were chosen, they were made fun of when it came out 25 years later. What do you mean? To me as well. I don't know that I meant. Where's the money? Only the credits. It's like, and the Viceroys. It's like, we made fun of this 25 years ago. I'm surprised they released the movie in theaters now. They're going, do we need to do the racial sensitivity thing before this one comes out? Just be on the safe side? No, they're aliens. Yeah, but they're very specific. And the thing is, having seen lots of Easter eggs, when you watch it now, you're like, the Aura Singh moment seems to take a real long time because you're like, oh, there she is. The Senate scene where there's the ETs, and you're like, oh, it's right there. You see them, and they're really, I think as we know to look for them, they're really prominent. Same with Willow. And the pacing is still really weird. Like, it starts out, it's loud. Here's your battle with the Jedi and the droids, and the use of super speed, which they don't really ever technically use, I think, again, in any of the movies. They might use it when they're fighting each other, but you don't really seem to do the whole, like, aha, the little, burst of speeds every now and then. Well, it is kind of like action sequence, okay? Now we need to film the plot, okay? Action sequence. Like, so what exactly is the plot? So the Trade Federation is doing a blockade of Naboo, okay? Why? To try to get Queen Amidala to sign a peace treaty, okay? And then I started thinking, Senator Palpatine, who then becomes Chancellor in the movie, later becomes Emperor, a lot of his ascension happens because the Queen escapes. And his whole thing was like, oh, well, it's okay. She'll sign the treaty. She escaped. Okay. She went back. Okay, if you captured her now? No, she rallied the Gungans. And it's weird. You know, I'm very used to Lucas. Enjoyed doing more kind of like the 3-stage fights. If you watch Return of the Jedi, you've got Luke and Vader. You have the battle on Endor. You have the battle in space. So you've got 3 battles happening simultaneously. This one technically you have 4. You have the Jedi and Darth Maul. You have Amidala and all of her group making their way through the building. You have the Gungans and the space battle. And they're intercut just well enough. A lot of the dialogue, yeah, it's hard to be like, Jake Lloyd sucked in this. He's a kid trying to be like, you an angel? I'm a pod racer. This is Wizard. It's like, I can't think of any kid who probably could have given that dialogue that you would have been like, that's it. That's awesome. It's an amazing actor. And it is so weird knowing that, you know, one of the main reasons why we really got to have Keira Knightley just really blew up is because of her association with this, because she looked like Natalie Portman. And I'm like, huh. Yeah, it's weird seeing how that's what really kind of put her in lots of people's eyes and got her, you know, much more larger starring roles, and then led her to be in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like, you know, it was interesting to watch in theaters, especially taken there with someone who functionally was the target audience. Someone did fall asleep in our theater, which I thought was kind of funny. I actually heard someone snoring, and I was like, yeah, just with the weird pacing, I can see people falling asleep seeing us in the theater, especially at like a 7 o'clock. You know, it's a little over 2 hours. Interesting seeing the previews before. One was Beetlejuice, and then Twisters, and then Inside Out 2. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of this. That's kind of the summer. What we got? We got sequels. Really? Sequels to really old IPs that I remember like when I was younger. So, you know, it takes me back to that. I remember when they did Episode 1 came out in a 3D format. Didn't do well. I know they released this one to try to help get people primed for The Acolyte, which we'll see how that goes. But it was weird just hearing my daughter be like, yeah, no one really was excited about this except for her. I'm like, oh. It's like, yeah, if you really didn't have, you know, a parent who was into it, it might be hard for kids to get into Star Wars now. Because like there's not anything that's Star Wars geared more towards kids that's being released with enough regularity to it. Yes, you have the Lego Star Wars things, but I mean, is a kid really gonna like randomly be like, oh, Star Wars Legos? I want to watch a Lego thing on Disney Plus. No, they'll probably watch the Lego stuff on, you know, the Lego app. And it's like, it's really interesting. It's like, huh. You know, and there are people who I can tell were probably about my age who brought their kids with them. And I was like, I wonder if they enjoyed it. I wonder if they understood it. We got in the car drive back. My daughter was like, you know, I watched the Star Wars Lego stuff, and that was almost identical to the Lego thing. I'm like, well, yeah, that's how certain things, you know. So the only difference was, she's like, when they showed Palpatine at the end, the Lego version, yeah, it's like his head turned around to show the evil version, then back to the regular version. I was like, well, they didn't want to be that on the nose with it. But, you know, I almost kind of wish now that a little while ago, it was the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. Now, I know a few places during the Panini, which I guess is the phrase we can use now for it, that they did do things like Empire Strikes Back and Jurassic Park on like a big screen format. And I was almost thinking, you know, if we're looking at still years away from the Mandalorian Grogu movie, and if it ever happens, the Rey trilogy, you know, would it, if this movie makes some money, and it makes enough to make, you know, the conversion and re-releasing in theaters make sense, it could be interesting to actually see them, you know, release all 9 Star Wars movies. Even though technically there's 11, I'm pretty sure they might be kind of like, well, we release all of them in order. I think people would do. I think people would be excited. I think people would be like, which one did well? Rogue One did well. Why did Rogue One do well? Because people like Andor. I mean, if they release episode 1 to drum people be excited for the only season of Acolyte, season 2's already been canceled, why not re-release Rogue One to get people kind of excited for what's going on with Andor? I would love to see Rogue One in theaters again. Saw it twice. I would see it a third time. My daughter would love to see it too. It's one of her favorite Star Wars movies. So episode 1, saw it in theaters. If you didn't like it back then, if you watch it now, you've changed, the movie stayed the same. Certain things are decent. Duel of the Fates is still amazing. The lightsaber fights are fantastic. Liam Neeson is very good in this. And it's weird seeing a young Ewan McGregor, because we've seen him still in Star Wars stuff now. So there's the things that were good then, that people didn't complain about, are still good now. The things that people complained about back then are still bad, but I think in the context of everything else that's happened, they're not as bad, because we've seen things that have technically been more technologically advanced, but with even worse dialogue, poor characterizations.